Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. Very happy to be with you. I hope you're having a great weekend so far. It is a beautiful sunny day here, but not too hot, which is always nice. As we get started, I do want to remind you to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching this episode on. Helps the algorithm. Something else that you can do to help support the podcast and the network as a whole is to go to gsmcpodcast.net, and there you can leave a donation of some sort. That helps, as I said, not only this podcast, but the network as a whole. Your support is greatly appreciated. This podcast would not exist without you, the people who listen to these interviews, the people who keep coming back episode after episode, and hopefully finding new wonderful authors and new books to read. But I am greatly or gratefully appreciative. I guess either one could work, but I really appreciate everything that you do to support this network, whether that's, like I said, following on social media, sharing episodes, just liking and subscribing, whatever you do with interactions to engage that algorithm, very much appreciated. But once again, if you do want to help in a different way, you can go to gsmcpodcast.net. And thank you so much for all of your help and support throughout the years that this podcast has existed. So how is your weekend going? It is Saturday. The process of catching up is continuing. I had another interview today, so we've got one more in the queue to be posted in the future. But I am trying to catch up. Thank you for your patience. You especially, but even more so the authors who have been waiting patiently for these episodes to get up. Do you have plans for the weekend? First weekend in June. Not much going on here. Pretty quiet. I think I'm going to be really crazy and walk to the grocery store later. So, try not to be too jealous of my exciting life. Actually, I'm grateful for the fact that I can walk the couple of miles to the grocery store. It's a little less than 3 miles round trip, so it's a very nice walk, not too long. And like I said, it's not too hot today. So I will do that, and there are plenty of beautiful flowers blooming right now. There's a horse that I walk by on the road, and so he sees me and knows me and always comes over to the fence to say hi. I'm assuming it's hi. I don't speak horse, but he seems like he's saying hi, or possibly get over here, lady, and bring me a snack. Not sure. Maybe I should learn horse. Maybe it would go better than learning Portuguese. I really don't know the answer to that, but we're not here to talk about my linguistic inadequacies, unless we're talking about the fact that I sometimes completely forget the word I'm looking for in English. We are here to talk to another author. And today, if you saw the end of the last episode and saw the preview, today I'm speaking with author Renee Gilmore. We are talking about her memoir. It is called Wayfinding. You see the cover there next to me. Let me go ahead and give you a description of the book. Throughout her life, Renee Gilmore has been in love with the open road. Her passion for exploration has taken her across all 7 continents, but the real journey has been much more personal. In Wayfinding, she confronts the impetus behind her wanderlust, a lifetime shaped by loss, betrayal, and sexual violence. Told through a series of car trips and postcards from the road, this powerful memoir maps a route toward healing, acceptance, and hope, with stops at Waffle House and the Monaco Grand Prix along the way. Narrated with unflinching honesty and flashes of humor, Wayfinding is the story of a fiercely resilient woman determined not only to survive, but to remap a new life filled with freedom, connection, and joy. And so there you have the description of Wayfinding. It is, as I said, a memoir. You did hear that there are instances of sexual violence told in this book. We do not talk about those explicitly in this interview, but you know your trigger warnings better than I ever could, of course. So please be advised that this interview, not as much. Renee mentions trauma in more of a general way in the interview, but the book is more explicit. It is on the page. She doesn't go into hugely great detail for which I, as a reader, was appreciative because it was sometimes hard enough to read without that detail, but still knowing what was happening. It can be difficult, but that is not that is not the whole of this memoir. There are moments of joy, there are moments of hope and humor, and it's all not bookended, interspersed with these stories of travel, these postcards, these images. And she tells stories of travel because it's a bigger story of a journey, right? So the whole memoir is a journey, and then there are these smaller travel stories within. And I don't mean smaller as in less important, but just stories that are interspersed throughout this memoir. And those give us those. You get other scenes into Renee's life. Yes, there was trauma. Yes, there were moments that shaped her, of course, in many ways, but you also get to know her sense of humor and her sense of wonder and just her love of exploring the world. She's been to all seven continents, and that's amazing. I know one person personally, well, I guess now two, because I've technically met Renee through this interview, but I know one person personally. My aunt just went to Antarctica for her 70th birthday last year. This year, her 70th was last year, but she went to Antarctica this year as her birthday present. And she's been to all seven continents. I don't know if I'll ever make it that far, but it's a good goal, right? So this book has so many good points and good points of connection for you as a reader. And Renee will talk about some of those. This interview, we had some interesting, we had an over enthusiastic spam filter, and we almost missed the interview because details don't matter. But Renee did have a deadline for being somewhere else. And so there are moments this interview might feel slightly rushed to you. I don't ask some of the same questions I ask in other interviews at the end. That is okay. I just wanted to let you know that it might feel a little bit different than some of my other interviews, but I really enjoyed speaking with Renee and hearing about the writing of this book. So hopefully you will too. Let's let you get to that. Again, the book is called Wayfinding. The author is Renee Gilmore. Hi, Renee. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for being here. We had a little bit of an interesting journey to get to this point, but thank you for being here. I'm excited to talk to you about your memoir, Wayfinding. Before we do that, would you take a minute to introduce yourself?
Of course. So I'm Renee Gilmore. Wayfinding is my debut memoir. I live just outside of Minneapolis, where it is beautiful and sunny and warm finally.
Oh,
So
good.
I'm I'm a corporate trainer for a large bank, and I'm a mom, a spouse, and a stepmom and a step grandma.
Okay, wonderful. Those are all good things. So give an overview of Wayfinding.
Yeah, I'd love to. And it's funny you said that we had a journey to get together this morning because that is such a good segue into
Yeah.
talking about wayfinding. So Sarah, throughout my life, I've been obsessed with roads. Not metaphorically, literally obsessed with roads. Highways, maps folded into glove compartments, late night diners, the intimacy of long drives with people you love or people you're just trying to survive. I grew up in a family of mechanics, racers, car enthusiasts, so movement really became a part of the language of my childhood. Before I understood what movement was emotionally, I understood it physically. I believe that if you got in the car and you kept driving long enough, eventually the landscape would change, and maybe you would too. What I didn't understand for many years was this. I thought I was traveling towards something, but really, I was trying to outrun something and maybe everything. My memoir, Wayfinding, really began with that realization. So, on the surface, it's a story about travel. Postcards from trips across America and journeys across all seven continents. It's the Monaco Grand Prix, flat tires on I-80, tuk-tuks in India, and trips to Waffle House.
Mm.
But underneath, it's a much more personal story about family secrets. It's about violence and grief and reinvention and the complicated search for joy. Wayfinding dares to ask a question, Sarah. What happens when the life you built to survive no longer feels like the life you want to live?
Mm.
One thing that I really cared deeply about when writing Wayfinding was creating something that was really authentic and emotionally honest without reducing myself to what happened to me. I wasn't interested in emotionally flattening myself or readers. So while this book contains a lot of really difficult material,
Hmm.
it is ultimately not a memoir about devastation. It's a memoir about freedom.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Um, so what was your impetus to sit down and write the memoir?
So, funny story, I never set out to write a memoir. So, I am also a poet. And a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to write a poetry chapbook about my father.
Hmm.
So, I took a short sabbatical and I locked myself in a hotel room and I said, I am going to write a 60-page chapbook about my father. And I'm going to use all my poetic structures and it's going to be amazing. So at the end of 2 weeks, here's what happened. I had already written 80 pages. I could not use any poetic form
Hmm.
because it was too constricting. The stories that I wanted to tell would not fit in those structures. And fun fact, I figured out it was not all about my father. So that's kind of the origin story of wayfinding.
Yeah. And then you mentioned the word journey, so talk about wayfinding as the title and why you chose it.
So Wayfinding ended up being probably the sixth or seventh title because as I was writing, it was title TBD. As I got deeper into the book and as I was looking at the structure of the book, because honestly, this was a journey that I had no idea where it was going.
Hmm.
And so I just kept slogging through and the title changed along the way. So the title originally was about like a traditionally organized memoir, which is, hey, I was born and this is what happened, and I was a kid, and then I was a grown up, and oh my God, all these traumatic things happened. And then I was, on my way to being an older person and reflecting, and pretty soon I'm going to die. So that's how it started. And so the titles kind of went along with that. But the book now is not structured like that at all.
Hmm.
I'll leave that there.
Okay. I don't know. I actually kind of like TBD. I mean, it's a good placeholder, but it's also, aren't we all TBD?
For sure.
Maybe not the perfect title, but a good placeholder. I actually like the name "To Be Determined" as the name of a memoir. It's a great placeholder, but I don't know. Aren't we all kind of in the process of being determined? We can't all have the same memoir title, though, so we can't all make that. We're all to be TBD, and that is the name of our collective memoir. But I like it. I don't know if I would ever write a memoir, and would that be the name of it? I have no idea. But let's go ahead and take our first break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about Renee's process for structuring the memoir, what stories to include, etc. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we We all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Renee Gilmore. As we get into this second segment, your second and final reminder that you can go to gsmcpodcast.net to support not only this podcast, but the network as a whole through a monetary donation. Again, your support is always greatly appreciated. And once again, that is gsmcpodcast.net. So before the break, Renee was talking about the fact that this didn't start out as a memoir, but evolved into one, and how she had the placeholder name for a while. But let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Renee. So you sat down to write something completely different and then found yourself writing this. When you figured out that this was actually a memoir, then what was the process for, okay, I need to figure out which stories I'm including and how I'm structuring it with that travel element and the journey element? Talk about that process.
Sure. So the original structure of the book was the chronological structure that I told you about. And when I was lucky enough to have Truro House Press accept this book, it was in that chronological type of organization that people expect when they pick up a memoir. I got a great editor named Dick Terrell, and we sat down and looked at the book, and he said, the book is good. And I'm like, that's not what I want to hear.
Right.
And he said, but I think it could be different and it could be better. So we took it all the way down to the studs and we looked at everything. We looked at the structure. We looked at the stories. We looked at how each of the stories was constructed. And the best feedback and advice that Dick gave me, which was also felt like horrible advice because it meant I was going to have a lot more work, was that I needed to restructure the book in how I experienced it, in how I experienced these stories. So the book is not chronological anymore. It is more set up geographically and topically and experientially. And the book is organized more in a little bit of like the chaotic type of way that I experienced all the things that were in here. And then when I looked at the stories themselves, the insight that I got from Dick was I am really good at reporting the news. So this happened and I said this and we went here and then this happened and scene and then on to the next thing. What I was really missing, Sarah, was that emotional piece. How did I feel? How did this change me? What did this do to me on a physical or emotional level? And so the book started out at, I don't know, like 225 pages, and now it's well over 300 pages because, the challenge was accepted to go back in and look at those stories, relive those experiences, not super fun, but, and then really kind of connect with how I did feel about it and how it changed me going forward. And some of these stories really changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah. You mentioned at the beginning of the book that sometimes you struggle with memory, that there's things that you don't remember, there's things you don't want to remember. And this book, of course, you had to go back, just as you said, and remember some of those things. So, how was that process? Because I feel like you had really good reasons to forget some things. So, how was that process as you started walking that path on this journey to the book? For you personally?
Oh, it was awful. I mean, just to tell the truth, it was physically painful in some instances, definitely emotionally painful. I've talked to a lot of memoirists who are like, yeah, I went through this and it was so cathartic and it was wonderful. I was not one of those people, Sarah. It was an interesting process, I would say, because I think I used the phrase in the book. I was like a furred animal out in the backyard digging and digging, trying to find the thing, whatever the thing was. But It was it was definitely part of the journey. And I think of it as kind of a continuum, both my experience and writing the book and the book itself, which is for me, I experienced a tremendous amount of trauma. And then next on the continuum, I was able to engage in healing. And I think of it as like Jenga, Jengaing
Yeah.
myself back together. And then for me, I got stuck in the messy middle. So I
Mm,
had the trauma. I went through this healing process. I was putting myself back together. And I knew that there was a better future somehow. I knew that there was a better version of me and a better version of life. And I needed to remap that myself and figure out what that was going to look like so I could ultimately get to the point of transformation.
yeah. As you were writing and then you started including the travel stories, do you feel like those stories helped kind of ground you in a certain way or helped you to shape the rest of the stories that were harder to tell?
That's a great question. I think they do. I am a massive travel enthusiast, maybe a travel obsessive, if I think about that. It's one of my favorite things. And I hadn't realized how the journeys that I've been on, the trips I've been on, really in a lot of ways tied back to some of these traumatic experiences. And it wasn't until I really got into the book that I was seeing those connection points everywhere. I was seeing connection points in having a flat tire along I-80 in Nebraska and having a experience in a tuk-tuk in India and having these experiences growing up with my parents and in a U-Haul with my dad.
Mm,
And I think that they did guide the book a little bit. And I think they guided my own journey back into memory and to connecting with that.
yeah. Is there, I can't imagine choosing from all of your experiences, but is there one trip that maybe was not what you were expecting or something, I don't know, something just that stands out for you?
Oh, so many things. I think you're absolutely right. I would say there is a commonality in several stories of things happening against my will
Mm,
and traveling. How do I say this? A trip or a travel or a coercive journey.
mm,
So, spoiler alert, there's a kidnapping story in here. And there is a story of driving from Texas to New Mexico. Maybe there was a Texaco, I don't remember, where it is definitely against my will. But I think the pivot point in the book actually happened in a parking lot. So,
okay.
strangely enough, in a car, but in a parking lot.
That actually seems really appropriate considering everything that you've talked about and written about. And um, what do you hope readers will take away from the book?
I think there's so many things. Like I said before, there are a lot of really heavy parts to this book, but I want readers to take heart because, like I said before, the intention is not to give readers the experience that many memoirs provide, which is they take you down into this really heavy stuff with this just trauma. Some people call it trauma porn. And I am
Mm,
not interested in doing that. What I want
mhm,
to show readers, and especially readers who have experienced trauma, that you can go through these things and you can be stuck in the messy middle. But my experience was that somehow I figured out how to put one foot in front of the other and get out of that. And my experience is not going to be the same as other people's experiences, but I'm not a therapist. I'm not Brene Brown, even though she's amazing. I'm not a professional who is going to give you advice on how to do this. But I hope that my story illustrates that it can be done and you can get out of the messy middle to a place of transformation, reinvention, joy, and connection.
Mm.
And if one person sees themselves in this book and they're in a place where they're feeling stuck, I hope that that gives them motivation and maybe inspiration that they can do it too.
Mm. When I read the description, I think it ended with something like freedom, joy, and connection. I could be misremembering that, but I did write down what Renee was saying just now when she was speaking, and she said transformation, reinvention, joy, and connection. And I love those four words and those four themes. There really are those four themes represented throughout the book. Even in the travel stories, you get those the joy and the connection and the transformation. So those are some really good entry points if you are interested in any or all four of those things being represented in the books that you read. We're going to go ahead and take our next break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about reactions of friends and family. I am always curious about how people react when someone writes a memoir, especially one that's this deeply personal in so many ways. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Renee Gilmore. Before the break, we were talking about transformation, joy, connection, reinvention, the things that she feels are represented well within this memoir. Let's go ahead and return to that conversation with Renee. There's a lovely story right at the end of the book with you reading some of the passages with your daughter and her reaction to that. And this book is so very deeply personal, and there's a lot of relationships. So how has that process been with friends and family as they've read the book?
Well, one of the things that's kind of funny, not funny, was one of my beta readers was my son, Samson, and he's 32 years old. I gave him the galley and I said, "Hey, I'd love for you to read this and validate some things." And about 20 minutes later, I got a text from him and he said, well, I won't tell you exactly what he said, but it was somewhere along the lines of WTF, mom, a trigger warning would have been nice.
The first little bit of the book is hard as a reader. I can't quite imagine being your son, and maybe knowing some of it, but not knowing your experiences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
except for the things that he experienced with me, he really had no idea.
Okay.
And so I said, you know what? You need to be a little more detail oriented and read the table of contents.
Yeah. But how many of us skip that when we just
When
flip
I get
right
to the
past
good
the table
stuff,
of
the
contents?
words.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see that. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to make sure that you talk about with the book?
Oh gosh. Um, I think I want to reiterate because so many of the memoirs I've been reading lately have been heavy, but heavy with no resolution,
Mm,
where I keep going back and I think about these people and I'm like, I hope that things changed for you.
mm,
Um, I want people to know that there are some pretty funny parts to this book. Especially there's a story about driving lessons.
mhm,
And so while it's deeply personal, I hope that folks will be able to see themselves in some way in this book. Whether it's somebody who is travel aspirational and wants to know a little bit about these places, or if it's somebody who has experienced trauma, or especially if they know somebody who has experienced trauma, they see that that person is suffering, and they want to provide them with some sort of narrative or inspiration. I hope that they can engage with this book and share it with others as well.
mhm. This isn't a question so much as a comment of you seem to have a very good travel partner in your brother, and siblings could be a challenge sometimes, but you two seem to actually really really do well traveling together, so that's amazing.
Yeah, we do because my brother is the chillest person you'll ever meet. Like his whole vibe is just like calm and chill. And as you may be catching on from our conversation here, I am the antithesis of chill. And so when my family goes on trips, I plan everything because that assuages my anxiety if I know everything that's going on. For my brother's 50th birthday, we went to Monaco. We are both, obviously car people and like
Hmm.
F1. So we went to the F1 Grand Prix in Monaco. And we joke all the time, as one does, because it is very
Yeah.
much a different demographic when you go to an event like that. It's very different from me. And so before the trip, um, I gave him his birthday card and then I gave him a 14-page PowerPoint of what we were doing on our trip. So every day it's like, we are having breakfast at this time at this place. And then the train leaves at this time. So we need to leave the hotel at this time. And that is just like, I think that kind of sums up me and how I address travel.
Wow. So how do you address travel when the things do not follow the PowerPoint? Because there's gotta always be something.
Oh, Sarah, my life has not followed the PowerPoint. And I'm a little bit like that Friends episode pivot. So I always have a plan A, B, C, and
Okay.
D. And when it all goes, as my grandma would have said, when it all goes to hell in a handbasket, then you just have to stop and take a breath and just figure it out.
Now I'm just picturing you standing somewhere, some random country with your brother screaming the word pivot.
Exactly, exactly. That's not far from the
Okay.
truth.
If people want to know more about you or the book, you have a website and then any social media that you're active on.
Yes, my website is reneetherewriter.com. They can find me on Instagram if you want to see travel pictures or music festivals or pictures of fried chicken. You can find me at Renee the Writer on Instagram. And then on Facebook, I'm renee.gilmore.writer.
Okay, great. Do you have any quick advice for somebody who thinks they want to have, they have a memoir in them?
Do it. Do
Okay.
it. Because the hardest thing is writing the draft. And there are several writers. I'm not sure where the genesis is, but the best thing you can do is write a shitty first draft. I call mine the ugly baby.
Mm.
And it doesn't have to be perfect. Just get it down on paper. And maybe you need to put it away for a week or a month or a year, but come back to it. People think that their story is not interesting. Their story is personal and unique, and it's always worth telling.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know you're a little busy, so thank you for taking time to talk to me about the memoir and the writing of it. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Sarah, thanks so much for having me. This was terrific.
So thank you once again to Renee for joining me to talk about this book. She was mentioning that she hopes that one thing that people might get from this is, if you're feeling stuck, if one person who is feeling stuck can read this and feel like they are not alone, or somebody else has had some similar experience, or just needing some kind of encouragement. It goes back to what she was saying when she talked about what she hopes readers will take away from the book, those feelings of transformation, reinvention, joy, and connection. If this sounds at all appealing to you, then you should definitely check out this memoir. I mean, if you're a fan of memoirs, then you might want to check this out anyway. But if any of this conversation resonated with you, Renee's experiences, what she has taken from those experiences, what she's trying to do with her life because of and in spite of those experiences, those are all really good reasons to read her story. And if you love travel and you love adventures, one thing that it always makes me smile whenever I read the description of the book is it says from Waffle House to the Monaco Grand Prix. Those are some pretty disparate experiences. So Renee has been to and seen a lot of places and a lot of things and had a lot of different experiences. So that alone is worth checking out the book, but also her resilience and her sense of humor and the way she approaches life with her children and writing and her family, etc., etc. All good reasons to check out this novel. So thank you to Renee. Thank you, as always, to you for joining me. We're continuing to catch up, so I hope you will join me for the next episode when I will be speaking with author K.L. Murphy. We are going to dual timeline historical fiction. So we've got a timeline in the 80s and a timeline in 1918. And The Great Forgotten is about a train wreck that I had never heard of before. It was overshadowed by the fact that the Spanish flu was happening, World War I was happening, but this was a train wreck in Tennessee that killed, I want to say, over 150 people, over 100, and I think over 150 people, but I could be remembering that number incorrectly. I had not heard of this incident, and neither had Kelly, so she wanted to write about it. She learned about this incident, and she wanted to write about it. So she does so from the point of view of one of the women who is a historical figure. She was the daughter of the train engineer in that accident, but then imagines what her life might have been like, what living with that incident might have been like, because there was the incident, there was the accident, there was a trial. Her father was the train engineer, etc. But there's also the stories of 5 men who were on the train that day and what led up to the event. And so you've got a lot of different interesting elements. You've got social norms of the time, race relations of the time, unionization on railroads at the time, because conditions for workers, and it doesn't sound like the conditions of the trains themselves were that great. Lots of really interesting points. So that was maybe more information than you needed right now for a preview, but join me for the conversation, because Kelly talks about all of this and much, much more. So please join me for the next episode with K.L. Murphy talking about The Great Forgotten. In the meantime, start and end this way every time. Please support the podcast if you're a fan, of course, by liking, following, and subscribing on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching the episode on. You can also leave a nice review. That is incredibly helpful in terms of engaging that algorithm, getting the podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. If you've already done that, thank you a million times over. If you're thinking about doing it but not sure what to write, don't overcomplicate it. That's what I do, and it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be, I like these interviews. I learned about an author I'd never heard of before. Short, sweet, simple, those work too. It's just the fact that there are reviews out there. You should also do that for your favorite authors. If you read a book that you love, put that out in the world. Let other readers find it. You can also follow the podcast on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Threads. If you're on a social media platform, look up GSMC and see if we're there. I love hearing from you, so let me know what you're reading. Let me know if you have questions about books or authors that I've talked to, or just be as nosy to me as I am to you and hit me up with those questions. I hope you're having a great weekend so far. I hope it continues to be great. We're only on Saturday, so you've got another full day, depending on when you listen to this episode. But whatever you're doing, you know what I'm going to say next. I hope that you have plenty of time to get yourself lost in a great book. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.